Hello there, this is John Franquez, and as promised, we're going to be doing our presidential series on the U.S. president. All presidents, U.S. presidents, starting from George Washington all the way to Obama. And in the process, we're going to be examining lots of American history. Now, a lot of the episodes are going to be very short, but we're going to dwell quite a bit on George Washington because he has such a predominant place in the American Revolution, but also because the history is very, very fascinating. So here we go with the American presidents. A lot of people look at George Washington as this old fuddy-duddy. I mean, look at this picture that we have over here. And if you look at the $1 bill, he's an old man. Believe it or not, he didn't wear wigs. I mean, whatever paintings you see with that hair, that was his hair. It's more important to look at Washington as a very active person. If you look at the paintings when he was about 44 during the American Revolution, he was a dashing, strong young man. And hopefully we'll get to that image right now. But anyway, remember that George Washington, if anybody ever asked you where was he born, people would say, well, he was born in the United States. But no, he wasn't. Washington would have considered himself a British and a Virginian. In fact, the first six U.S. presidents were born British and became American later. What's amazing is we've had 240 years since the birth of the United States in 1776, but 300 years before that, the British were colonizing. There's 300 years of history in the Americas that the British were involved. They were involved in trade. A lot of them came down here to settle looking for religious freedoms. We had merchants, we had traders, we had Quakers, we had Puritans, Plymouth Rock, Jamestown, tons of history, and eventually the British colonize the eastern coast of today's United States with 13 colonies: Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Rhode Island, Georgia, and Virginia, where George Washington was born. Quick note on Georgia. All these colonies were settled because they were either trading or the settlers were looking for religious freedom, and the British were promised them settlements in many cases. Georgia, however, was pretty much colonized because they wanted to have a military buffer to keep the Spanish away. Anyway, let's get right into it. George Washington's father, Augustine Washington, was married previously to Washington's mom. He was married to a woman named Jane Butler. They had a few kids. She died, and then he went off and married Washington's mom, Mary Bell. Now, Augustine, the dad, brought along a very important person in Washington's life, and that is Augustine's son, Lawrence, which is George Washington's half-brother. So anyway, Augustine married Washington's mom, Mary Bell, and they had 6 kids. Now, Washington was expected, because they were not a rich family. You might look at Washington as very rich and aristocratic, but no, they were well-to-do. His dad was a trader, a tobacco planter, slave holder. We're going to be talking about slavery in another episode. But anyway, and Washington's half-brother Lawrence went to England to study. He joined the military as well, fought the French, and got a military commission. George Washington was expected to do the same. But a couple of things happened. When Washington was 8 years old, their house burned down. Ferry Farm. The archaeologists recently have found Ferry Farm. Ferry Farm burned down. Lost all those possessions, and that was pretty traumatic for an 8-year-old. But worse than that, when Washington was 11 years old, his dad died. Now that's traumatic in itself. However, for George Washington, that also meant that his future went down the drain. He was not going to be going to England, and he's probably started wondering, what's going to happen to me now? He's 11 years old. What is his future going to be like? He's not going to England. They couldn't afford to send him. The land that his dad had acquired, Mount Vernon, which we're going to get into later on about Mount Vernon, but Mount Vernon at the time when his father died went to Lawrence, his half-brother. Washington was not close to his dad. Of course, I'm sure he loved him. He was closer to his mom. Now, his mom, in the future, his mom was kind of the woman like, well, you got money, give me money. You're a general, give me money. Now you're the president, give me money. That kind of was Washington's mom. But anyway, Washington's dad died, and something that people fail to mention is that his sister Mildred also died the same year. And anyway, this happened when he was about 11 years old, and he was expected to be going to England to study, but that plan went down the drain. So what did he do? Washington became a surveyor. And as a surveyor, he started making money, he started networking with a lot of families, he started meeting a lot of people, and in the process, buying a lot of land. He became very, very rich. He started exploring the wilderness. He met his first Native Americans. We'll talk about that later on in another episode. And his brother Lawrence. His brother Lawrence met a woman named Anne Fairfax from the Fairfax family, which were a pretty predominant family in Virginia society. Lawrence marries Anne Fairfax. Remember, Lawrence is about 10 years older than George. George, as a young man, meets Anne's sister-in-law, Sally Fairfax, and he becomes smitten. He's in love with Sally. But what happens? Sally is married, and she's married to one of Washington's good friends. Did she ever love him? No, but she flirted constantly with him. He would send her love letters, and she loved it. So think about this. So Washington, no future that he wanted, even though he was starting to make some money. Dad died. Ferry farm was burned down. And then what happens? At the age of 19 years old, he goes to Barbados with his brother Lawrence. Now, why did he go to Barbados? Washington had gotten sick with the smallpox. And at the same time, his half-brother Lawrence got sick with tuberculosis. They expected that the temperature, the warm weather in Barbados would be good for both of them. They went. This is the only time Washington has ever gone outside the U.S., ever traveled outside the U.S. Washington got better, but the smallpox apparently affected his skin, and it rendered him sterile. He never had children after that. Lawrence, unfortunately, when they got back, Lawrence, whether he got a little better in Barbados, I don't know, but he succumbed to tuberculosis and died. So here is another blow to George Washington. His half-brother Lawrence, who he became very close to, Lawrence, remembers, 10 years older, became his father figure to a point. And he's gone. So now he's about 19 years old. He decides to join the British Army. He joins the military. And in that process, he gets to fight in the French and Indian War. And we're going to talk extensively about the French and Indian War in a separate episode. But this war lasted roughly about 7 years or so. When he came out of that, he never really mentioned too much about war. He said the sound of bullets was charming, which I don't get. But he must have been semi-traumatized by experience. So here he is. He's gone through several things in his life. Father died, sister died. His future went down the drain. He had to go out there and hustle his way to making some money. Then his mentor, his brother, dies, and he goes to war for 7 years. And he wanted to get a British military commission, which he didn't get. Now he comes back. Now he's 27. He's seen a lot. By this point, he forgot about Sally Fairfax, and he meets Martha Custis, a rich widow. Martha had been married before. She was married at 19 years old, and in about 7 years or so, she had 4 children. 2 of them died when they were about 3 or 4 years old. She had a son and a daughter left. Then her husband dies. So she marries George Washington. Now, were they in love? No, they had just met. But he apparently was very impressed by her, and I think love came later. And he described a time that he was with Martha at Mount Vernon, which by this point he had inherited Mount Vernon, the land, got very rich. Washington, in today's terms, would have had about $500 million in today's U.S. Currency. Back then, he was a very, very rich man. He became very, very rich. But at the same time, he was very happy working on the farm, doing several projects, buying land. And it was the happiest time of his life. Sadly, Martha's children, she had a son and a daughter. The daughter died at 13 from epilepsy. Her remaining son did reach adulthood and got married, but died young. Now, he left a couple of kids. George and Martha raised those kids, their grandkids. Now, he was a very happy man at the time, but little did he know the American Revolution was going to come along and snatch Washington away from Mount Vernon and into the whole world history, you could say, the United States history, a predominant place that even he could never have imagined. There's going to be a lot more, but we're going to stop right there for now. And this is John Franklin signing off. And throw me your comments, or better yet, subscribe. And expect Chapter 2. Thank you.